Hello all, I'm Steve Chown, Specialist Financial Advisor for Wesleyan. I work within the GP sector throughout the Southwest, and welcome to my part of this webinar. I'll be trying to help you understand a little bit more about the NHS pension, and in particular the recent changes that were announced before and during the spring budget. Firstly, however, can I thank Lentils for the invite. It's been really useful for me, and I've certainly learned a few things this morning anyway, so thank you very much. And secondly, as was mentioned right at the start, timings are perhaps a little tight, so it's unlikely that I'll get round to answering all your questions today. However, pop any questions in the Q&A bit at the bottom, and they will come back to me and I'll answer them on an individual basis. Alternatively, I will endeavour to get my contact details in the chat or the Q&A bit, so please feel free to contact me at your leisure, and I'll be more than happy to help on a one-to-one basis. So if we start on that first slide, that Wesleyan are here to support you, let's just have a quick look at who we are. Wesleyan Assurance Society, we've been around for over 180 years. We were actually set up by GPs for the benefit of other GPs. And after 180 years, we certainly have the experience and resilience to deal with any uncertainty in financial markets or the wider economy. And an area that sets us apart from the rest of providers is our advisory board. This is a board that contains leading members of your profession, so they're here to make sure that we're constantly delivering products and services which are always relevant and valuable to you and your practice at every stage of your career. Within Wesleyan, we have our team of specialist financial advisors, as in people like me, who specialise in working with people like you. We understand your complete career path, and we're here to support you with the financial decisions you will need to make throughout that path. We also set up the Wesleyan Foundation in order to help good causes across the UK deliver vital support to their local communities. And furthermore, Wesleyan announced a £1 million mutual support package to help frontline critical workers, as well as providing a welcome boost to schools, charities and community groups in need of equipment and funding amidst the COVID-19 crisis. If we then move on to the next slide, this just shows that we can support you with financial advice, products and services throughout your life and career. It's just a little bit of a highlight as to what we do. That can be the first steps in the career ladder, buying your first house, protecting your family and valuables, saving for your children's university fees, planning your retirement, leaving inheritance to your family. The list is pretty much endless. And it's not just for GPs, it's everybody within GP practices. It's everybody that wants to see me. I'm more than happy to give my expert advice. So it's just a quick overview of many different services and products that we offer on this slide. So let's have a look at if we move on to the next slide, we look at what we'll actually be covering today. But before we look at that, let's just first touch on the NHS pension scheme basis. So this isn't on the slide at all, but just the basics around the NHS pension. The NHS pension is actually made up of three different schemes. So you've got the 1995 scheme. That's where the retirement age is set at 60, or the standard retirement age is set at 60. You've then got the 2008 scheme. This is the one where you had the choice to move across back in 2008, and the standard retirement age of that one is actually 65. And then obviously the new 2015 scheme, where the standard retirement age is actually set to the state retirement age. And this one is where you had no choice at all, and you had to move across. I say the standard retirement age because there are a few members that may have retirement ages sooner. It just depends on your own circumstances. And now, unless you actually joined the NHS pension after the 1st of April 2015, you will have membership of two schemes. Most of you, but not all, will be in the 1995 and the 2015 schemes, but there will be a few of you out there that have membership of the 2008 scheme. The benefits of all three and how they calculate the benefits of all three are based on earnings throughout your career rather than contributions. And all three have different ways to calculate the benefits at the end. To go through exactly how they calculate is a little bit too much now, time consuming. But the 1995 and 2008 schemes also have different ways of calculation depending on your role. So in order to get to know your individual pension better, I'd urge you to make contact so we can review this together, because everybody's circumstances are different. So let's have a look at some of the recent changes on this slide as we are now. And firstly, the McLeod judgment, and then following that, the very recent raft of positive changes through the NHS pension. So on the 31st of March 2022, as it was briefly mentioned before, all tapered members of the NHS pension, these are members who were gradually moved across to the 2015 scheme from the two legacy schemes, either in 1995 and 2008, ceased all contributions into their corresponding legacy scheme. You had no choice. Everybody, as from the 1st of April 2022, if you want to be in the NHS pension now, you are in the 2015 scheme, irrespective of age. So this is all to do with the McLeod judgment and the tapering, the tapering and how quickly you moved across is what the McLeod judgment actually deals with. If you want to discuss this in a bit more detail, then please feel free to contact me. But in essence, what happened is the same transfer happened for barristers and firefighters. Now, the barristers and firefighters thought this was discriminatory against the younger members, so they fought against it, and it was found in their favour. So now the NHS pension will do this calculation for you, and they will look at the remedy period from the 1st of April 2015 through to the 31st of March 2022, and they will calculate whether your pension would have been better in the old 1995 scheme or 2008 scheme, or whether it would be better in the 2015 scheme through that 7-year remedy period. So that's the McLeod judgment pretty much in a nutshell. But as I said, if you are keen to know a little bit more on how that will affect you, then everybody is very, very different. So please just get in touch. So if we then move on to the next slide, please, Shirley. So because there have been a few changes as a result of the McLeod judgment. So, and that's to do with the deadline dates, and due to the implementation of the McLeod remedy, the deadlines for issuing pension savings statements for 2022, 2023, and for applying for scheme pays have moved back a bit to give NHS pension a little bit of time to actually calculate those changes and what it means to members. Statements now need to be issued by the 6th of October 2024, and scheme pays elections now need to be made by the 6th of July 2026 for active or deferred members of the pension, whilst it's actually July 2027 for retired members. There's going to be a whole heap of recalculations. There's going to be a whole raft of stuff to do. So I think this is pretty much to be expected, I think. If we then move on to the effect of McLeod on pension individual protection. So in fact, that's the one. But individual protection that may be in process now, everything needs time to be reprocessed, as I said, and revalued. And as you can see on the slide, they have given that time. The deadline is now removed. But given the further changes that are announced in the spring budget, which I'll touch on in a moment, relating to the lifetime allowance, the annual allowance, etc., then it's worth reviewing to see if actually individual protection 16 is worthwhile anyway. So moving on to the changes that were announced just before the spring budget. Okay, so the first big change was pensionable re-employment, second partial retirement, and the third, which was touched on earlier, was the removal of the 16-hour rule. So the as from this month, sorry, the 16-hour rule for retire and return has been abolished. Okay, it was temporarily scrapped, but they've entirely abolished it. Pensionable re-employment is being introduced, which is a massive change towards flexibility. And the CPI revaluation date is being moved. It's being moved as well, which is going to be a huge thing for annual allowance calculations and reduce annual allowance taxation, which is fantastic news and all positive. It's all been announced to give more flexible retirement. It's probably all been announced to try and keep people within the NHS longer than the age of 60. But even so, it does give the NHS pension members a bit more flexibility in terms of their retirement. So if we look at the pensionable retirement bit and what this actually means, it's a really positive change for all of you. As I said, I think it's designed primarily to encourage NHS staff to think about working longer and at least past the age of 60. But as you can see from the slide there, previously, if a member takes their 1995 section benefits, then they could not carry on contributing to any NHS pension scheme. So that's when they would perhaps think about reducing their hours, think about reducing sessions. The practice would have to offer the Nest pension scheme, and we don't know yet as to what this now entails, as to what's going to happen to these Nest pension schemes. So watch this space. But the changes are now those members who retire and take their 1995 benefits can return to work. They can rejoin the 2015 pension scheme. It allows members, particularly who have reached maximum service in the 1995-2008 sections, if you're a non-GP, to join the 2015 scheme, as it says there. They still insist on that 24-hour break, but you can return to work, rejoin the 2015 scheme, and carry on contributing to the pension, carry on building your pension benefits. And the process and rules are pretty simple. There's no real limitations anymore, other than the fact that if your income exceeds 90% of your pre-retirement income, then they will actually suspend some of your pension income. So you've just got to be aware that I think that's on the next slide, actually, Shirley, if you can move forward. So this moves on to the partial retirement bit as well, which again is very similar in so much that it's not currently available in the 1995 section. That was the original position, but it does allow people to take up to 100% of their pension and carry on working. It is a fantastic chance for you now to those not allowed previously. It's a real step in the right direction to give you more flexibility. Perhaps you can reduce your hours, you can work less sessions, or maybe you can just earn more for the last few years of your career. You can build up your savings, clear that mortgage quicker, whatever it may be, before you actually retire. So it is good news. The next change is the removal of the 16-hour rule. Now, this is to do with the current retire and return legislation. So the original position would be that in order to access the 1995 benefits and then come back to work, you'd have to have that break of 24 hours and then work less than 16 hours per week for the first month. And it has to be per week. You can't stack up your holidays to make sure that you only do, on average, 16 hours per week in that first month. It was suspended through COVID, and it was suspended until the 31st of March 2023, but it's now permanently removed. So I think it's just, again, a bit of good news. I think it pretty much stops just a few more unnecessary checks and paperwork, really. But all told, it's good news. So the next step, if we look at the next slide, and we look at what effect does CPI have on my NHS pension and what it means. And in fact, what this means to when I said the CPI revaluation dates were changing, what this actually means to you. So when they do the annual allowance calculation, along with adding your pensionable earnings, each year your pension is uplifted by the September CPI plus 1.5%. So this, depending on the size of your pension, the movement in CPI, so inflation, can have a significant impact on the growth of your pension. On the plus side, a higher CPI rate results in a higher potential pension increase, but the increased growth has caused there to be annual allowance tax charges for many of you, where many of you have previously been unaffected by the annual allowance. It's been pretty much a nasty shock indeed. So to explain that a little bit more, where the CPI inflation figure is used to revalue the previously accrued NHS pension, that's based on the value of inflation from the current tax year. So if we look at 2022, 2023, the inflation rate that they used to revalue the starting position was 3.1%. The inflation rate that they used to revalue the end position was 10.1%. So that extra 7% growth, which you had no control over, meant that a lot of you suddenly had an annual allowance issue, because 7% growth alone on existing pots is pretty enormous. So to remove that, and basically what is happening, the government is moving the dates revaluation takes place from the 31st of March to the first day of the new tax year. It's a long-winded way of saying basically they're getting rid of the CPI revaluation bit. It's going to stop any further inflationary disconnect. The aim of annual allowance taxation ceases to be due on inflationary difference, which at the end of the day you have no control over. And together with the annual allowance rising from 40,000 to 60,000, most of you will no longer have an annual allowance issue. There will be a few that still have that annual allowance taxation problem, but the majority of you now will not have any problems whatsoever. So it is a massive positive. So what's Wesleyan view on the change? This is huge. It will affect thousands, particularly GPs who may have been facing enormous annual allowance tax bills, as their entire pension, including the legacy 1995 and 2008 pensions, were in effect a care scheme. So the inflationary growth was on their previous schemes as well as the 2015 bit. Many other doctors and consultants have, of course, been hit by the annual allowance taxation in recent times as well. And this measure, as mentioned, will see most, if not all, AA tax charges go, and may actually create potentially more headroom for pension savings, whether in the NHS scheme or perhaps otherwise, which then means that other members will and can remain in the scheme, and members that have previously opted out or had to indulge in the games of hokey cokey with opting in and out at certain times can now rejoin and actually continue to build up their pensions for their future retirement. The NHS pension is fantastic. The annual allowance tax charges were very, very counterproductive, and getting rid of these annual allowance hurdles can only be good news. So moving on to the next slide, we look at the spring budget and what was announced there. Jeremy Hunt actually mentioned that it was very much designed to encourage, or certainly encourage NHS staff to stay longer, not worry about the effects of on their pension. And two big points from this slide for me. The first has already been mentioned a few times, is the lifetime allowance has now been removed as of 2023. This means that you haven't got that lifetime allowance charge in place. So any income that's produced by all of your pension pot now it is now taxed at the normal rate rather than carrying an extra lifetime allowance tax charge. Just be aware, however, the tax-free lump sum is still limited to 25% of the original lifetime allowance. So it's capped at £268,275. So which is not an insignificant sum of money at all. But I think the government have been fairly clever here in so much that they're not giving away too much in terms of tax-free cash. They're still going to get their they're still going to get taxed via the PAYE system on their pension, but the tax-free bit is not increasing at all. And then the final bit that I want to point out on this slide is the fact that the annual allowance is increased to 60,000 from 40,000. So the two changes on the annual allowance are massive. We've got the CPI revaluation bit that I've just spoken to you about. We've got the annual allowance increasing from 40 to 60,000. It's these two bits will mean that many fewer of you will actually be stung by the annual allowance tax. It's definitely snuck up on you in the past, and you didn't, as I said, you had no control over it. But I think less and less of you will now be affected, which is just positive news all round. So the next slide, our approach. What do we do? Pensions are a very tricky area. They're a complex area. One size does not fit all. One solution does not fit all. One explanation does not fit all. You're all individuals with individual needs and unique finances. You're likely to have many questions, whether that's just, well, how do the annual allowance charges affect me? How do the lifetime allowance changes affect me? Whatever question you have, however big or small, please just let me know, and I will do what I can to answer them. If I don't know, we also have a technical department at head office that I can pass your details on to, and we will be able to answer anything that you come up with. So if we go on to the next slide as well, this is just, what are you faced with? What's your planning likely to be? It is undoubtedly a time of change, uncertainty. The markets, economic markets are uncertain as well. What's around the corner if we do have a change of government? We don't know. We will cross that bridge when we come to it. But in the meantime, I say to a lot of clients, some have got this NHS pension, which in some instances is worth £500,000, some 150,000, £1 million, for instance, and they don't know any details about it. Imagine saying to somebody that you've got £1 million investment and you don't know the full details. It's not going to be the case, and you need to understand. You need to understand where what it means to you and what it means to your family and your own finances. So please feel free, as I said. So one final slide before I do actually sign off and hand you back to Jane. And it was really interesting to listen to Ed just now talking about the statistics that he can produce, and the cost of locums net of NHS England reimbursement is at the moment £75,000 per practice on average, which I found quite staggering on an annual basis. So this is something that Wesleyan are very proud of, and we look at for many practices throughout the country. As you can see, we provide locum cover for over 1,700 GP practices in the UK, which means that we're actually the largest locum provider in primary care. And what sets us apart and why we are different we have a unique approach with all of our cover provided through a full assessment of your needs before building a tailored solution. So I know that there are some out there that provide just a blanket cover for everybody on the scheme. That's not how we work. We look at what you need. We look at how much perhaps doctors work. We look at how any member that needs to be included on that plan, whether it be nurse practitioners, whether it be practice managers, whether it be the doctors, salaried or partners, and how much their absence would mean to the practice. So we then build in the support that you get from NHS England, and then we come up with a full assessment of your needs based on those unique circumstances. You then also have me at the end of the telephone or at the end of an email, and I come and see you once a year just to make sure that everything is still as it should be in terms of the level of your cover. But you also have me on the end of the phone or the end of an email to answer any pension questions that your staff may necessarily have, which I know that some practices that I work with find very useful. But the biggest plus for our plan is the fact that we provide permanent cover. This means that unlike the rest of the market, claims will not, or any claims that you make will not result in a price increase the following year. Other locum insurance tends to work like home insurance, car insurance. You make a claim in 1 year, and more often than not, the premium for the following year or perhaps the year after absolutely rockets up in terms of becoming sometimes prohibitive. It's not the case with ours. Once you're underwritten, once the members are underwritten, we'll not alter our terms. We'll not alter our terms, we'll not alter the conditions, or in fact the premium in the event of a claim or even multiple claims, whether that year or the following year or future years. Hence the phrase permanent cover. It's not permanent in so much that you're tied in for any period of time. You haven't got to have it for any length of time. It's permanent in so much that we don't change the terms and conditions. So it's in light of, in particular, of what Ed said and what I've just mentioned, I'd invite all practices. It's a free of charge, no obligation review of their local insurance. I'd need sort of 15 minutes of your time to ensure that you've got the correct cover, that it exactly fits your requirements. Exactly fits your requirements whilst also building in the fact that you do get support from NHS England. However, I'm sure we can probably save most practices a fair bit whilst also providing better cover. So that's pretty much it from me. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the NHS pension and the changes, but a whistle-stop tour of how I can help you understand, and also understand how it will affect you and your family going forward.